The interview you are about to hear on this communique cassette is unique. This is not a biblically based Christian confrontation. Why then am I sending you this particular cassette? The publisher for Mr. Harvey MacKay, who is one of the best-selling writers in America, approached me recently wondering if I would like to talk to him. He's written 2 books. Swim with the Sharks Without Being Eaten Alive, #1 on New York Times bestseller list, and Beware the Naked Man Who Offers You His Shirt, also #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. To my knowledge, Mr. MacKay is not a biblically confessing Christian, but he is a man of wisdom and considerable judgment, and he is listened to by the most powerful corporate leaders of America. I've read his books, and there's some fascinating wisdom that is very much akin to scriptural wisdom. And so this month we're doing something a little different. And I'm doing this for many of you in business who wish to become more successful, or those of you who are thinking about going into business. Now, if that's what God has called you to do, I believe it would be well-pleasing to the Lord if you would be successful. For by being successful, your good works will be seen before men, and the light of Christ will be recognized in you, and you will have greater resources to share with the kingdom of God, to help ministries like this and others. And so this is my way of encouraging you and giving you some very valuable information. Now, don't be listening to this tape expecting some great spiritual lesson out of it, but you know, the most practical lessons in life that we learn about how to treat others and how to survive and succeed are basically biblical lessons. Now, they're not couched in that terminology, but what you hear Mr. MacKay say, I think, will ring true to your heart as a Christian in many ways. Now, you're not going to agree with all of it, but I think you're going to see in here a man who has found, without quoting Scripture, some basic truths about success. They bear witness to what God has taught us already in His Word. When I concluded this interview, Mr. MacKay turned to me and said, you know, in promoting this book and traveling around the country, I have been on several hundred radio interviews. Mr. MacKay said, this is one of the best. Send me a tape of it. I enjoyed this. And I was highly complimented by that. I did my best to probe him, to push him, to find out what information I could that would be helpful to you. And now I share it with you. I hope it will help you to become a better businessman or businesswoman. I hope it will help you to understand, even outside of the business world, some important lessons in life. And if you will take this wisdom and add to it the scriptural responsibilities that you have as a Christian, to diligently labor, to care for your fellow man, and to be responsible and ethical in your work life, this audio tape will have served the purpose for which I've intended it. He's a marathoner, a #1 ranked tennis player in Minnesota. This guy sold a lot of books. In 1989, spoke to 150,000 people in 3 continents and earned $1.4 million. He has some money, too. He led the community drive that built the Metrodome in the city of Minneapolis. He is the CEO of an envelope corporation in Minneapolis. Harvey MacKay, welcome to Talkback.
Bob, thank you. It's nice to be with you.
Your book, Beware the Naked Man Who Offers You His Shirt, has been on the New York Times bestseller list for 20 weeks. Swim with the Sharks Without Being Eaten Alive has been a #1 bestseller. You are kind of one of the foremost gurus in the country right now with regards to outselling, out-managing, out-motivating, out-negotiating your competition. So what makes you not just another one of the sharks out there eating people alive? You just are a little bit bigger and smarter shark.
Well, Bob, first of all, I guess if you're lucky enough to have written a book that was successful, and it's been translated into 18 countries and distributed in 80 countries. That's both Swim with the Sharks and Naked Man. You try and look at what you've done right. And I guess I have a couple advantages. Number one, I happen to be in the business world and have been there for 35 years. With all the respect to consultants and to professors, at least I've been there, I've met a payroll, and so I'm sharing 40 years of my personal experiences. Secondly, maybe what makes me a differentiator is my father headed the Associated Press for 35 years in St. Paul and was a journalist and a writer. And he just taught me that if you're ever going to be a teacher, and I've coached Little League, baseball, basketball, given tennis lessons and golf lessons and boxing lessons, that you must teach with humor. The Talmud says that if you have humor and teach with humor, the retention stays at least 50% longer. So I like to put some humor in the books. Thirdly, I guess just the fact that I care about people, I call it caring is contagious, help spread it around. That's the kind of business manager that I've been. It seems to have at least rubbed off on my businesses, and I've had some success with that philosophy.
Well, obviously you've had a lot of success, but you also deal very realistically with what's going on in the world. You write the endless cycle of asking and being asked, giving and getting and manipulating and being manipulated is built into every human relationship, even the most innocent and loving. As I look through your books, your advice is like that, very practical, very pointed. These are not rose-colored glasses that you're looking through. I mean, you take a very human approach, but you also take a very practical approach. How would you describe it? Is it, the Bible says, be as wise as a serpent and harmless as a dove. Is that the balance you're trying to draw?
Well, again, it's a good question. Let me go back, if I can, just for a moment. Ray Kroc, founder of McDonald's, and he said, and I'm quoting him, he said, it's not dog eat dog out there, it's rat eat rat. And I might add, in the real business world, as you look around, second is last. That's what everybody's telling me. Mm-hmm. Well, I don't necessarily believe that's true. In fact, we're right here in Denver today, 4 Super Bowls, 4 second-place finishes. I'd love to come in second. No, because I'm from Minnesota, Minnesota Vikings have lost.
The only other team has done this.
4 in a row. And I also know that you happen to follow those Broncos. But my point is, I'd love to come in second. I don't think, again, that you have to be, the ends justify the means. I don't think you have to be that way.
You were not there with me in New Orleans last year. I was there. I had an end zone seat. I didn't like it.
I was there. I saw it. I've traveled on all 4 Vikings planes coming back from the defeat. But back to your question, I do look for balance. I don't like people that tell the truth, but only half the truth. I think you can be very, very candid. I think you can be a tough negotiator. I don't think that you have to be a workaholic. I think if you adapt and adopt certain principles to your lifestyle and to the way you run a business, it's the same as if you're running a university or running a hospital or you're a gymnastic instructor or a coach or whatever. You have to have certain moral grounds. And yes, I know the country is loaded with examples, of course, of people that are getting ahead by only telling half the truth. But in the long run, every single thing I do is for the long run. And I was brought up and raised by my father to have a good memory.
You don't fudge? You don't get ahead in business by fudging?
No. Yes, short term. Oh, yes. I can do business with anybody in the country by fudging. I can get on an airplane, I can go cut the price anywhere in the country, and the people have to buy my product because I'm 25% of the market. I can promise delivery and then not perform. And isn't it interesting that the subtitle of my book, and Beware the Naked Man, is again, do what you love what you do, and deliver more than you promise. So I can cut the price, I can cut the delivery, I can promise 4 colors and only give 3 colors. I can promise, I'm in the paper industry, that the weight of the paper is going to be X and I'll ship Y, and I will have a lot of orders. I won't have customers. See? In other words, I don't care how many pails of milk I lose, I don't want to lose the cow. And the cow is the customer.
So what's the driving force here? Because if you know the other sharks are out there and they're trying to eat you alive, and that naked man's walking around trying to sell you his shirt, is it a matter of expediency? Is there a larger worldview context of ultimate morality? Is it for the good of the community and the country? What is the driving force that makes the person wise enough not to be taken and out-negotiate the other guy, but at the same time deals with that in a larger ethical context?
He has to, or she has to, have their antenna up. They have to know, again, that there are sharks out there, shark-infested waters, unfortunately, whether it's buying a car or buying a home. And, again, they tell you the truth, but only half the truth. You cannot be naive. Again, you can be lean without being mean. And that's the way we run our business, quite frankly. So as long as you're aware that they are there, and as long as you're aware, let's just take office politics, for example, which is really rough. And I believe, and I write, that if you have a two-person lemonade stand, there will be office politics. There are office politics everywhere you go in these United States. And as long as you know that the bullies are there, that the people are going to stab you in the back, that there's jealousy and there's hatred, competition, unfair competition in all those offices.
You fight fire with fire? Well, how do
No.
you fight it? What do you do with it?
You fight it with superior information. You fight it with a philosophy that in the long run, again, you will win. And that bully or that person, again, that's the liar, the cheat, he or she isn't going to make it long term. Short term, without question, they'll be very successful. And that's why, of course, I could go on and on and on with the televangelism, with the Boskis of the world, and I even go into the athletes, the Pete Rose. If I were in the Hall of Fame and they actually elected Pete Rose in the Hall of Fame, my perspective, I would probably resign.
You are great at aphorisms. I mean, you've got quotable quotes. They just come out of your pen with such a prolific sense that I hope we got time to get through all of them. And I want to pull you up on some of these quotes and get some quick answers from you, quick explanations. Quote, your salary, net worth, medical records, and sex life, nobody's business. Don't tell them.
The definition of a secret is when one person knows. And I really firmly believe, and I've seen it happen, and of course I write about it, where loose lips sink ships. The walls have ears, and therefore you have to keep certain data, certain information to yourself. And of course the story I happen to mention in the book is a woman that was hired and got paid a very good starting salary in the $19,000 to $20,000 range, and her advisor and counselor was only making 21.5 or something, and all of a sudden she went to the boss. And the boss, of course, brought the young upstart in and actually terminated her. Said, I gave you a starting salary. You went around and bragged about it. I've got problems. You see, there's the jealousy again angle that came into play. And all of a sudden her father couldn't bail her out of a problem, which means we're really growing up. So from that standpoint, over and over and over again, I've seen people. I've seen the largest negotiation almost in the history of our state of Minnesota in the last 90 days. And I can't talk about it from a confidentiality standpoint, but I've seen a person go in the room with his peers on a substantive, huge business transaction, and he was bragging about something which he should have kept his mouth and lips sealed, and it came back to haunt him, and someone talked, and he lost the entire transaction, and it is affecting the Twin Cities community for the next 30, 40 years. So again, your sex life and your salary, your W-2 form, again, should remain within your ear to ear.
It isn't the quality of the ideas you have that will determine whether you make a success of them. It's the qualities you bring to those ideas.
Yes, and it's Bob, kind of a believe in yourself even when no one else does. This is what I've been brought up and raised all the time. You know,
sort of Rudyard Kipling-esque sort of thing.
Yeah, had I written Naked Man maybe 9 months ago, had I written it 2 months ago instead of 9 months ago, I probably would have dedicated the book to Buster Douglas, who knocked out Tyson. I think it was the 10th round, Tokyo, February 11th. Greatest upset in the history of boxing, some of the experts are saying. You have to bring your own confidence into that room. It's interesting also, I write about very few people have the ability to get up and speak on their feet. Why? They just don't have the confidence. They don't believe in themselves. And so if you've had that training, if you've got the confidence, and that's why we never hire anyone unless they go back to night school or Dale Carnegie or some junior college or University of Minnesota and get some training to be able to express themselves on their feet. The quality of the idea is important, but it's you yourself. Nothing sells itself. And when you come into that room, you come into that negotiation, you have to look behind and say who's saying it.
It's not just how smart you are, it's your
No.
communicative ability to let other people know the effectiveness of that idea and how it can be implemented in the company?
Yes, you hit the nail on the head. There are all kinds of people out there, listeners to this very program, this moment, who know how to do it. But you see, knowledge, again, does not, another aphorism, but I'm sorry, knowledge doesn't become power until it's used. They have to know how to use it in that communication style.
People should not mistake what you're writing about in these books as being just to the CEOs, just to the movers and shakers. You deal with the average level of a person out there. You talk about things like failure, how failure is one of the ways it becomes successful. How many times can you fail and still make it?
A lot. Like for weeks, months, and years, you can fail. You can take Abraham Lincoln, beyond comprehension, went through bankruptcy, ran for 4 different elections. Sweetheart died when he was 35. Had, I think, 11 straight failures. And in 1860, Abraham Lincoln, as you know, was elected president of the United States. I hear coaches all the time, and I love athletics, quite frankly. My father had all those Associated Press passes, not only to the roller derby, but to golf and tennis and karate, you name it, everything. So I started attending athletic events. But coaches keep saying, you don't learn anything from failure. I just hear it over and over again. I have never met a single human being who's never, ever been successful. I mean, unless they've had some failure, had some problems. Life is not a parabolic curve. I mean, you have to pick yourself up off the floor, and you have to learn from failure. I have another favorite philosophy that, again, my father taught me. When a person with money meets a person with experience, here's what happens. The person with the experience winds up with the money, and the person with the money winds up with the experience.
I read that in your book.
And you have to go through. You can't start at the top and work up. I mean, rookies basically don't make it in athletics. You learn in your 20s, and you earn in your 30s. I've counseled over 500 people what to do with their lives in their 20s, one-on-one, in Minneapolis. And I just keep telling them that life equals the total sum of his or her experiences.
Please tell me about the 40s. I'm there. I just kind of like to know out of my own interest.
But failure, again, you have to fail. And sometimes you pray that you will fail. Just a quickie example. My son went to Stanford University, had to drive from Minneapolis to Palo Alto, California. Never gambled in his whole life, and he stopped off at Reno or Las Vegas, as I recall. Can you believe that he won? Now, he's only 21, but he won $100. Started with a couple dollars, won $100. Worst thing that ever could have happened to him.
Yeah.
Now he really thinks he knows. And I want to tell you, that's going to cost him in his experience. I wish he would have lost.
One of the things you say is your best form of damage control is to anticipate the worst before it happens. Please tell me why a company as huge as Exxon did not know that. Is there an arrogancy in some big business circles today? Surely what's going on, the anti-business rhetoric that's in the press, the lionizing of the failures of the BOCES, et cetera, and so on, business is taking it on the chin. Why was a corporation like Exxon not able to heed your advice? Why weren't they ready for this?
Power does corrupt, unequivocally, without question. It has the last 50 years, and it will the next 50 years. However, and of course I've studied, how did the Japanese and the Taiwanese and the Germans and the Koreans, slam us into the pavement, hand us our head? I've studied that. I've studied the Japanese language. I've gone to Japan, lived with 300-400 Japanese for a period of 10 days. How they do it. And all of a sudden, you see right away teamwork. You see a work ethic that sometimes our managers haven't had. You see level after level after level of middle managers piled upon one on each other, bureaucracies. You see, that's no longer true today in 1990, nor will it be true in the next 10 years. I'm guardedly optimistic. So we start with these managers that I think some of them are fabulous out there. I salute and applaud the managers that are doing a great job with certain corporations. But unfortunately, there are too many of them out there, again, where all they care about is themselves. What are you doing for me today? and they want to climb the next rung on the ladder. They're short-term thinkers, and of course, as you know, the Japanese are long-term thinkers.
Oh, very much so.
I met Mr. Matsushita, President Matsushita Electric Company, spoke to 1,000 Americans. Question, Mr. Matsushita, does your company have a long-range plan? Answer, yes. We have a 250-year long-range plan. Next question. I was sitting next to Ken Blanchard, the one-minute manager, third row in Tokyo. Tell me, Mr. Matsushita, what are the necessary ingredients to make that plan successful? Answer, you have to have patience. These managers, these Exxon managers, why don't they anticipate? They're strong. They're making nothing but money, a ton of money. And again, they have blinders on, and they're not thinking long term. I call it dig your well before you're thirsty.
Let's go back to an issue that we just touched on a moment ago that relates to this. I'm not sure I got a total answer, and that is, what is it a mixture of, or one of, or whatever, the things that motivates that long-term perspective, that human relations perspective, that avoids the short-term get it now and count your cash and run with it? Is it, or let's ask the negative, have we lost a certain moral root in our society? Do we no longer do things for the common good? Is there some broader spiritual, ethical, moral, social context in which what's good for everybody is good for everybody? Has this been lost? How do we regain it? What is it that we don't have anymore that permits that guy to just go out there and cut what he's got to cut and do what he's got to do and lies he has to lie to get ahead?
One of the problems, Bob, I'll come at this at a different angle and then come back, and it's an excellent question, of course. But our system, of course, is one big disadvantage. And as you well know, short term. When you're a publicly held corporation and every 90 days, you have to come up with a report.
The old quarterly report, the old stockholder report.
And I just want to use the car industry if I can. I mean, here in the soaring 60s and the 70s, give the unions, and believe me, I'm not anti-union, give the unions, though, whatever they want, slap on $500 per car, pass it on to the consumer, and that's it. Worry about it later because there was no competition. Okay. All right. Now, 5, 10, 15 years go by, and they're making, all of a sudden, they're making $2,000, $4,000, $8,000 a year, 12, 18, 20, 25, 30, $35,000. Finally caught up with us. So you see, that president that governed those companies didn't care about 5 or 10 years from now. All he cared about was his own presidency.
It was personal greed.
Personal greed, without question. Didn't do anything for the long term. I happen to be a very firm believer in the one-term president. You see, when a politician gets elected, vis-a-vis whether they're president of the United States or a senator or whatever, when he or she takes his hand or her hand off the Bible after they get sworn in, do you know what happens? Right to the brain goes, how do I get reelected? And that's why I happen to think if you could get long-term thinkers, see, as politicians, they will do the right thing for the country. So to start out with your question, number one, the system is really bad if you're a publicly held company. Now, I'm a privately held company. We have 350 employees. Briefly, I moved to Iowa 8 years ago. It was a terrible short-term decision. Why? We didn't have these skills in Iowa, Mount Pleasant, Iowa. So I had to move people from my main plant in Minneapolis and my skills down to Iowa. We had 2.5 to 3 years of poor profits. But the next 25 are going to be outstanding because now we do have the skills. If I were publicly held, I might have had a raider or a shark take me over, and our earnings per share would have gone down, of course, had I been publicly held. So there are great advantages to being privately held. Now back to more specifically, and I don't know if I have the answer. I do know when the president coughs, the market can go down 200 or 300 points. I know when there's a Boski around or what's happened on Wall Street, 35,000 brokers have been laid off. My daughter lives in New York. She would date a fellow. She's been out of school 2 years. She'd come back and say, Dad, the fellow I just went out with made $250,000 last year. And he's only 23, just out of school. I mean, I said, Darlene, just want to tell you, with all respect to that industry, he will be shining shoes. He will be out in the street. I hope he's smart enough to at least put some of that money away because it just doesn't work that way, supply and demand. Won't happen. So we do have a lot of greed out there. It is publicized, obviously, 100-fold. with all our instant telecommunications, as you well know. And maybe that didn't happen back in the 40s and 50s and 60s. However, as I look around, I spend 1/4 of my life in volunteerism, in United Way, and Heart, and Cancer, and Junior Achievement, orchestras, and so forth. As I look around, I see a dramatic change in the 90s.
I'm going to ask you about this 1/4 of the time that you spend in those types of efforts. There, I would think, is a perception that to be successful in business, you really have to go 7 days a week, 16 hours a day, and you need to be about the business of doing the business. What then motivates you to set apart that time unselfishly for the sake of humanity in a larger context, for the community at large? Obviously, someone is going to say, hey, the guy knows his name's going to be appearing around as Mr. Good Guy in relationship to all of this, and it's going to be good public relations for the company. Is there a deeper reason for it? And should there be a deeper reason for the business community to build those bridges to the charitable, to the helping community?
I was lucky, Bob. I had a mentor. I had an advisor. I had a counselor, which was my father. Got a hold of me when I was 18. I saw him spend 1/3 of his life in humanitarian causes. I saw him receive an award from our U.S. Senator as the Humanitarian of the Year in the Twin Cities. So I come by it naturally, and he taught me that the finest gift that you can give another human being is to help someone along the way. It's the finest legacy one human being can leave to another. Again, not what are you doing for me today. My father taught me you have to have a good memory. Every person and every successful person that I've ever come in contact with, someone helped him or her along the way. And how many of them have had good memories to go back and thank them? Not too many people. Again, Business Philosophy Day, what are you doing for me today? You know, you can be my supplier of paper for 10 years, and you perform, all of a sudden someone comes in and cuts your price by 1%, and I'm history. You know, I leave you. I think that's a pathetic way, again, to conduct business. Billy Graham taught me at an early age, and his offices are in Minneapolis. Not a personal friend of his, but a friend, and I've been in his company. He entertained all the suppliers just out of humanism. I mean, he's giving us tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of business, and every year, this goes back 30 years ago, every year he would have 2 or 3 parties for the suppliers, and he'd say, thank you. We could not conduct our ministry unless you people were performing. You see, so
you mentioned Graham in your book, and you talk about how important a reputation is.
You cannot buy.
Yeah, I mean, here is a man who is absolutely unassailed. How do people in the business community take that type of an example from the religious community and translate it into the work world?
Well, I learned it from him, and what I did right away, going back 30 years ago, he taught it to me, and then I just taught it to our people. So we treat our suppliers. We have ink suppliers. Again, I manufacture envelopes, 10 million every day.
A lot of envelopes.
And remember, you can only use an envelope once, and then you have to come back and order more, Bob.
This is real planned obsolescence, isn't it?
But here I am, ink suppliers, paper, carton, advertising. We entertain our customers. We treat our suppliers. We treat our suppliers exactly as well as we treat our customers because they're human beings. They're part of the team. It's a team effort all the way, and that's the way I manage. Example, Boston Celtics won 16 NBA World Basketball Championships. Never once did they have the leading scorer.
This is the end of Side 1. Please turn the cassette over at this point for the continuation of the message on Side 2.
The most important term in any contract isn't in the contract. This is lesson number 26 from your book. It's dealing with people who are honest. You and I both know that lawyers write contracts so that other lawyers can break those contracts and they can fight over it and raise up the legal fees. But when you sit down with those shark-infested waters out there and you look across the negotiating table, eyeball to eyeball with that competitor or whoever, you're about to make a deal. Now, you know what's on the paper is on the paper. How do you really know if the people you're dealing with are honest? What are the things that you look for as a businessman in those settings?
I call it, and it's a wonderful question too, I call it superior information. Again, you do your homework. If I could change the title of the naked man who offers you his shirt, and I don't want to change the title, the real working title is Prepare to Win. And that's what I'm doing in those kinds of negotiations. Specific example because I just got through with it. Agreements prevent disagreements.
Yeah, that's another one of your little
If you have an
maxims.
agreement, if you work your guts out to have an agreement, you won't have a disagreement. So I went out on a nationwide search for the last 3 months and tried to find a corporate president to head up our company in Minneapolis, MacKay Envelope Company. 3 months that he has signed and I signed. Just did it a week ago. We just started 7 days ago. When we signed the document, I said to my president, I don't ever expect to look at this piece of paper as long as we live. And I say that to virtually every key person I've ever hired in the last 30 years.
So a contract's not something you keep bringing out and say, what's the fine print say?
But here's my point. My point is, before I hired this person, I'm talking now about superior information, I went back to grade school. I went back to kindergarten. I called all over the country. I had industrial psychologists interview this person. I went out with them socially. I called all kinds of people again, you see. I had hour after hour after hour of meeting with him. I made him put down in writing what his beliefs are. I put down in writing what my beliefs are.
Beliefs.
Absolutely. In other words, we will run an honest company. We will report all of our inventory. We will not ever violate anything knowingly the way we run this business. Now, if you want to run my factory, if you want to say the inventory is X when you know it's Y, then don't take the job. And that's the exact example verbatim what I said to him. It's things like that right away. See, I get a real tough agreement with him, and then I won't have a disagreement. I said we're going to make an acquisition. All right? We're going to make several of them in the next 2-3 years. Now, I want to tell you, in the industry or not in the industry? Well, I wanted to go outside the industry. He talked me into in the negotiations that we're going to make an acquisition within the industry. But we have an agreement now. See, so we won't have a disagreement.
Little things don't mean a lot. They mean everything. Is a good business deal a little bit like making love to your wife? Or do you want the flowers and...
Yes, that's probably, if you ask me what's my favorite line in the book, that would be it. Little things mean a lot, not true.
What are...
Little things mean everything. You know,
Yeah,
I go on television.
like what? Like what, for example?
Surely. I go on television. I've been on about 250 or 300 shows in the last 2 to 3 years in many foreign countries. Again, the book's in 80 countries and 18 languages, and I'm proud of that. But on television, and this is why I'm happy to be here on radio, on television, with all respect to television, they put the microphone in front of you, and they say, how did you write a bestseller? And they expect you to tell them in 45 seconds.
Yeah.
And what I have to explain to them is that little things mean everything. I did 80 little things right. And that takes minutes and minutes and sometimes a half an hour to explain all of those little things, from the graphics to the color to the back flap to what's said inside, to the size of type, to the title, to the subtitle, to the index, to the short chapters, you know, so that people can right away get the gist of what you're talking about, like it's popcorn, to the marketing aspect, to traveling all over, to talking to the sales force or the publisher. If they don't believe in the product, how are they going to sell it? So I have a checklist of 80 things that I did. My daughter got married last week at our home. I had probably 90% of the guests say to me on the way out, what a fanatical attention to detail. And it rained in the last 3 minutes before they could say, I now pronounce you man and wife. And all of a sudden, white umbrellas came up fast in 12 different locations to keep the crowd dry. See, just a fanatical attention to detail on every single little thing. And if you give me a person with a good attitude, you know, who will just say, Harvey, I'll take care of it. Great words.
You have you've assuaged my perfectionism. You made me feel a whole lot better about it.
So I have a fanatical attention to detail. And let me just tell you another thing, which is interesting. This is a little bit different story, but I think it still proves a point. 40% of all Americans are unhappy. This is new data out of Washington 90 days ago. 40%. All Americans unhappy with their job. They go to work, never think about it, come back, dead-ended. I don't think that has to happen. I think that you can pay a little bit of creativity, a little bit of extra little things to your job, and you can make it fun. And I'm going to tell you a story. It happened to me 3 months ago. I roll in to New York. I jump into a cab. 80% to 90% of all cab drivers in New York are unfriendly. 90% of cabs are dirty, filthy, not clean. This is an immaculate cab. Doesn't have a bulletproof partition either, like another 3/4 to 80% of them. Driver turns around and says, "Hi, my name's Wally." And he hands me a mission statement. A little flashcard. I'm going to get you there safely, courteously.
You're kidding me. This is New
time.
York.
This is New York. We pull away, and he holds up the USA Today. And the New York Times says, "Be my guest. Would you like to read the paper?" Then he points to the back seat of the cabin. There was a Snicker and an apple and a banana wrapped up in cellophane.
Joke.
And he said, if you'd like, if you'd like
I've been
some
a
fruit.
lot of New York cabs.
I'm pinching
Where's this
myself.
guy?
And I wait. I'm just getting started. Now he says, and it's an immaculately clean cab, beautiful sound system, says to me, "Would you like to listen to hard rock or would you like some symphony music?" Gives me a choice. 20 minutes into the drive, holds up a cellular telephone. Says it's $1 a minute, Bob. $1 a minute. And be my guest if you'd like to use the phone. I said, "Where did you learn this?" You're going to love this answer. On a talk show. I said, "How long you been doing this?" He said, "Approximately 3-4 years." I said, "Tell me, I'm an author. I'd like to talk about this. How much extra do you make in tips, okay, because of this concept?" He said about $12,000 to $14,000 extra in tips. Now, there's a cab driver in America that couldn't do this tomorrow morning. Little things mean everything, and that's all they are, little things.
If you can afford to buy your way out of a problem, you don't have a problem.
Yes.
I think I know what you mean there. There is a tendency in business sometimes to catastrophize one's position to the extent that it doesn't really, it's not as bad as you may portray it to be or as you think it to be. There's some relative significance you're applying to it. That's what I got out of this. That if I can get my way out of it and I can buy my way out of it, I don't really have it. What are you trying to say here?
I'm trying to say the following, that when you're in business, and this isn't, of course, these lessons, Bob, I like to think are life lessons. They aren't just business per se lessons. Mm-hmm. But every time you have a problem, and there are a lot of problems that come up in business, right away, how much will it cost if I want to write the check and let the problem go away? Mm-hmm. An example, we ship shoddy merchandise, and when you're making 10 million envelopes every day, we do have poor merchandise. Like to keep it to 2% errors, which sometimes we exceed, but all of a sudden the customer complains. He's unreasonable. It's his problem, really, but he's my customer, so if I want to buy my way out of the problem, I just write him a check for the full merchandise. All of a sudden I can be in an airport, and boom, plane's canceled, bad weather, whatever it is, and I've got the right kind of ticket, though, so it extrapolates to a very cheap fare, okay, mm-hmm. when I catch the next plane. All right, but I have to get there. I want to get there now. How much is it going to cost me? Might have to go buy a whole new ticket. But if I can afford, and that's what's important, if you can afford to buy your way out of a problem, you don't have a problem. So you always look at any problem you have, how much is it going to cost me? Then you can intelligently make the decision, do I want to spend the funds? Can I afford to buy my way out? Problem goes away.
So instead of complaining about it and reaching a
yes.
reasonable stress level over it, just consider it part of the cost of doing business to get
Very
what you,
good.
because
Very
problems
good.
are problems, and deal with it and spend it and move on.
Exactly. And don't let it fester. In other words, it's sometimes you can say it's not what you eat, but what's eating you. and there are a lot of problems that eat away at people over a long period of time, and you can just buy your way out and get out of it immediately.
Anyone can win once. Champions know it's not having the talent to win that makes a champion. It's having too much pride to lose. We don't want to talk about the Vikings and the Broncos in relationship to that. What is it that really does make a champion in business in regards to their unwillingness to lose? Some people would say pride is not a virtue, it is a vice. How do we make it a virtue in this case?
You have to have consistency over a long period of time. When you're in business, you have to know that you're in business for 30 or 40 or 50 years. Again, I come back to that same saying. I don't care how many pails of milk I lose. I don't want to lose the cow. Right from my father, the customer is the cow. And so I'll lose all the time. I'll lose some orders. If you want to buy something from me and I can't perform, but boy, do I want that order, I'll say no. I'll turn it down. We can't perform. I've lost a pail of milk. You see? Now, to be a champion, and as I say, anyone can win once. That's true. I use the expression Jack Fleck. I happened to almost make my living playing golf going back 35 years ago as a professional golfer. Jack Fleck was from Iowa. He won the U.S. Open, never won another tournament. I could go on and on and on why champions don't repeat. I can go on and on and on why authors, okay, write a bestseller and then never, like about 99% of the time, ever write a second bestseller back to back. And what I found is certain things. Number one, the commitment, Bob, is not there. Before I wrote my second book, I thought about it for 6 months. Do I want to make the commitment to excellence? See? And if I'm not ready to make that commitment, then don't do it. Lou Holtz is probably my best friend, coaches at Notre Dame. He's on my board of directors at MacKay Envelope Company. I brought him to Minnesota. I'm on the alumni board there, and I was past president. Our athletic director was sick, and the president of the university asked me to step in. So I hired Lou Holtz, instrumental in hiring Lou Holtz, bringing him to Minnesota for 2 years. And the first question I asked him, I said, how come you were unsuccessful coaching the New York Jets? He was only there 6 months. And he taught me a very valued lesson that I knew, but now I know it in spades. He said, I went for the wrong reason. They threw all kinds of money at me. I never made the commitment, to be successful and to be an excellent coach in New York. I went for the money.
I got to ask, what you doing?
See what I mean?
Yeah, what do you do with a football coach on the board of an envelope company?
What do? You learn morals, you learn ethics, you learn communication, you learn motivation. I could sit here and talk for the next 4 or 5 hours about Lou Holtz. That's the kind of beautiful human being I'm talking about. And let me just give you one thing, which of course is in the book. True story. Sounds like an exaggeration, but it is not. And he said the same thing to me yesterday on the phone, and he said the same thing when he was at my house for dinner last Saturday night where my daughter got married. He says the following to every friend before he hangs up the telephone or before he says goodbye. He'll always look you straight in the eye and say, what can I do for you? Is there anything I can help you with? And he means it. I mean, it's the same thing. I'll never forget Norman Vincent Peale. Only met him several times, but the first time I met him, 4-hour lunch at the Drake Hotel. And he just got back from Tokyo the night before. And when Norman Vincent Peale looks at you, you know that you're the only human being in the world, that his focus is right there and that he cares about you. And I put Lou Holtz right there with Norman Vincent Peale as a beautiful, caring person. Caring is contagious. Help spread it around. Holtz tells me on a 1 to 10, 10 being the highest, I don't need all 10s to win national championships or 9s. I just need 7s and 8s with good attitudes. See? People that want to enhance their skills. People that really know what the word teamwork means. And let me give you my definition of teamwork because it's so very important. Teamwork is just taking a collection of diverse people, okay, who respect each other and are committed to each other's successes. That's what teamwork is. That's what I've learned from Holtz. That's why Holtz is on my board of directors.
So what you're telling me is that in running a business, and you do bring this out in your book, at the highest levels, it's values-driven, it's ideas-driven, it's not necessarily management-driven from the technocrat standpoint. Is this something that has caused us to lose a little bit of our competitive edge, say, with the Japanese? You alluded to the gentleman who was talking about 250-year plan. Yeah. Is this part of what's missing? We're not plugging into a more universal kind of wisdom about how we do things. We're just looking for the technicalities of what we can accomplish right now rather than seeing that broader context?
That's what I see in the Japanese. They have a team concept. They don't have any Lee Iacocca's, if you want to call Lee Iacocca a hero to some degree. He certainly saved tens of thousands of jobs and did a good job, certainly in the short run. Maybe the jury is still out. Peter Ueberroth happens to be a friend, but I admire and respect him. He took over the U.S. Olympics. I mean, this is a real leader. You see, Iacocca, with respect to him, though, he's paying those people wages. Peter Ueberroth gets tens of thousands of people to volunteer their lives, every second, every minute, every hour, every day, every week, every month, every year for years to work on the 1984 Olympics. And that adds up to hundreds of millions of dollars of profit, notwithstanding what happened in Montreal, where you got hundreds of millions of dollars of red figures in debt. So there is a real leader. And what I'm talking about is that you have to be a caring person. Gorbachev, Bush, doesn't matter what your political preference is. I think we're seeing a little bit more of a caring leader in the 90s. So if we want to catch the Koreans and the Japanese again and the Germans, the way we do it is you have to motivate and humanize your workforce. You care about them, and let me be specific. Let's say, Bob, you're working for me and I'm the manager. You're on one of our envelope machines, and all of a sudden I get the inspection slips and I see that your number is coming up, manufacturing poor envelopes, poor quality, and I have to reprimand you. I come over, you're working on the third shift, it's 3 a.m., and I do reprimand you, okay? And I tell you what's happening with our customers. We're losing a lot of goodwill. In the same breath almost, before I walk away, I want to have the option to be able to say, oh, and incidentally, Bob, congratulations. Understand your daughter just made the gymnastics team. Or your son, okay, graduated from high school. You see, our managers have a 33 questionnaire profile on all the people that they're managing.
Really?
What their dreams are. A goal is a dream, again, with a deadline. See? Measurable, identifiable, attainable, in writing. I want to know about your dreams. I want to know about your time and action calendar. I want to know if you care to enhance your skills. See? And so if I care a little bit about you, know a little bit about your family, now it's just not everything by the numbers. And over a long period of time, if you do that with tens and thousands of employees, look what happens to a Ford or General Motors or a super company like Exxon if they have the right kind of managers in place.
Don't just look at the dollar bottom line. Don't just look at necessarily the immediate cost effectiveness of something. The point is what it's really worth, where its true intrinsic value is. Is that a guiding philosophy of your company?
I think it is. Again, I'll just go right back to cover the book. Do what you love and love what you do. I write, find something you love to do and you'll never have to work a day in your life. And I think that can be accomplished. Can every American accomplish it? No. But certain people can, and especially if that is their goal, that they are going to love what they're doing, that they are going to make a hobby pay, that they will think. Again, back to Norman Vincent Peale for a minute. But he was pounding the table and he said, Harvey, he said, if we could only get people to think, that's what it's all about. IBM said it all. They printed tens of millions of placards. He said, think. I'll never forget this then. Also, he's 91 at the time.
Oh, yeah.
His wife, Ruth, was 83 at the time, the Drake Hotel, the story I was talking about earlier. And then he told a parable. Every time he made a point, he told a little story. His wife, Ruth, at one point stopped and said, why, Norman? You haven't told that story in over 45 years. To which Norman replied, but I do repeat myself sometimes. So get people to think. That's one of the things we have to do. The caring philosophy again. Do what you love what you do. And I can tell. I mean, maybe you wouldn't want to hear the people that happen that you report to. You might not want them to hear this, but I can tell you love what you do. I can tell by the smile. I can tell by your enthusiasm that you love what you're doing. You're very lucky, and they're paying you to do this.
I don't know if you've had an opportunity to speak to the National Press Club, but if you haven't, let's suppose that you have. And in the audience is the business community, is the religious community, and is the political community. They're there. What do you tell each of these communities on the basis of the philosophical bent of your books, that the business people, the religious leaders, the political leaders, what do each of these communities need to do to restore this country to its former position in the international marketplace? Because we're not even a second-rate nation now. I mean, in the opinion of some, we're 3, 4, 5. I mean, we're dropping steadily. We all know what the German miracle has done. We all know what's happened in Japan. You love the country. You want to see it turned around. What are you going to say to those three people out of all? I mean, your books are crammed full of just such an incredible array of all kinds of wisdom. Synthesizing it down, what do you want those three communities to do?
Well, let's go to the business leader for a moment. And I have to use an example. I think that the top executive in the United States in the 80s, 1980 through 1990, he retired March 30th, Donald Peterson, CEO of Ford Motor Company. He took over in 1980, market share for Ford 16%. He retired again 90 days ago with 23% of the U.S. market. the meantime, General Motors went from 45% to 35%. How did he do it? Well, first of all, you can't solve a problem unless you first admit that you have one. So he said, hey, we got a problem. Japanese again slamming us into the pavement. So he went over. He didn't cut off his nose to spite his face. Went over and studied the competition. Studied the Japanese. What did he find? An American taught him how to do it. Named Deming, as you probably know. Now he steals Deming. Puts him on his payroll. How did Ford make a better car the last 10 years? Let me tell you, Deming's philosophy, and it's been mine all my life, but Deming says it best. He said, we want, again, every employee on our payroll to improve just a little bit every day and every week and every month and every year. And when you add it all up, all right, as long as they care and they want to improve, that will build a superior product that will compete with the Japanese and in world markets. And so that's how Ford did it. So what do I say to the business community? I say that every human being that you put on your payroll, you take a very careful look at. We only have 350 people, but I've learned a long time ago, single greatest mistake that a manager can make is to make a bad hire. So I don't care if it's the receptionist or the truck driver, and I hire our truck drivers, I hire our receptionists. You call my office tomorrow morning, phone will be answered in 3 rings. There'll be a smile at the other end. Call back 4 more times in the weeks ensuing, and I want to tell you, she will match your voice, all right, to your name. Now, that's the little things mean everything. So I'm telling the business people out there, hiring practices are very, very important. Back to the simple basics, again, to be repetitious, that the caring and the humanize your workforce. That's what I teach. That's what I've been doing for 30 years. It works for me and my company, and it's worked for the other 3 or 4 companies where I've been an officer and director of other industries. What do I tell the religious leader? Again, I don't have all the answers, Bob. I don't know what I would tell the other religious leaders, quite frankly, other than maybe this, if they were televangelists, to why don't you just go back and study and read about, as I tell my kids and as I tell the people that I happen to counsel with and advise, go back and read history and read about the successful people and see how they did it. I mean, everyone should study Billy Graham, in my judgment. Really, a beautiful, magnificent human being. So if you're in that field of televangelism, I would say you study the successful people.
I appreciate your taking time to join us today, Mr. MacKay. And I think the thing that I have noticed most interesting about you, I'm a writer too. I've written 20 books. I've been on book tours. I've been escorted in and out of one radio and television station after another. I know what a long day it can be. I know how tiring. I know what it's like to be asked the same questions over and over, to have a fresh smile on your face, particularly if the camera is running, to continue to be sharp and articulate, and to have all of your force and energy behind you. You're at the end of, or nearly probably the end of a very long day today, and you are one of the best-selling authors in the country right now. You do not have to sit behind that microphone and display the candor, the zeal, the enthusiasm, the vigor that you've displayed here in the last 50 minutes. And that tells me an awful lot about not the books, but the person. And if there's a good person, there will be good books. But a bad person can't write good books. And to maintain that zeal tells me an awful lot about where you're coming from as a human being and why you're already successful. In closing, in just the next 2 or 3 minutes, what is it then that drives you? You're already a best-selling author. You're already this. You're already that. You're successful. You know, kudos. Do you need any more? Not really, do you? I mean, what is compelling you to do this? Why are you so bright-eyed at the end of a long day?
I would not have written Beware the Naked Man Who Offers You His Shirt had I not received over 15,000 letters from around the world, maybe 80% from the United States, about people that are saying, thanks. You help me. Constructive criticism of themselves, you know. In other words, now I see the light. This works. So that's why I wrote the second book, because I saw that I could make a difference. Again, I think the finest legacy that any human being can pass on to another human being is help another person along the way. And as long as I can write, and I might add that now I'm up to about 20,000 letters annualized on Beware the Naked Man. I'm going to the Soviet Union in 10 days. I've received Well, I'm ecstatic about it. A phenomenal offer to appear on national television for 5 days, and I love Soviet television, Bob, because there's only one channel. They can't turn me off, and so I guess I'll have a pretty good share of market. But I'm looking forward to going to the Soviet Union and helping even those people know what competition is, know what a free market system is, what entrepreneurism means, a little bit about motivation and management. I kind of call this man bites dog because I'm going over there, and they've invited me. And I was there in 1972 when I spoke Russian. I was somewhat fluent, and I can't believe what's happened in that country. Gorbachev came to Minneapolis 4 weeks ago after his visit, of course, to Washington. I was one of the lucky ones in the room. Can't believe it. He dismantled the entire Soviet Union in 49 minutes without notes, and then went 25 minutes Q&A. This man was incredible. I mean, totally just tore down the Soviet Union and said, we need you. And now I have an invitation. I mean, my gosh. So what turns me on? Why am I motivated? I think I'm making a difference with some people. If I can just help one person with this broadcast, as far as I'm concerned, it's been worth it. So you get two choices when you get up in the morning. You can be optimistic or you can be pessimistic, and I happen to choose optimism. I don't want to go around with negative people. I don't like negative people. I want to be around positive people. And if I can finish with a Beverly Sills story,
please do,
which is my favorite. She signed up, and you've written 20 books I know, and I've read about you, and I admire and salute and applaud your tenacity. I've written 2 books. You've written 20. And it's difficult. It's tough. But Beverly Sills wrote a book years ago, signed up for a 25-city tour. After 16 or 17 cities, one of her fans came up and said, "Oh, Miss Sills, I feel so sorry for you. You have to go to all those cities. You must just be a wreck." No, I get to go to all those cities. I don't have to do anything. And that's how I feel, Bob. I'm on a 35-city tour and 25-country tour. Soviet Union, then Istanbul, and then, of course, all over Europe.
And running the company, too.
The Far East, and trying to sell some envelopes along the way. But frankly, he who rides a tiger can't dismount. But I don't want to get off. I'm having a good time. I love it, and I love being here with you.
Thank you very much for your time, Harvey.
Thank you.
This is the end of the message. For further information regarding other topics available on cassette and in printed form, write Compassion Connection, Box 36C, Denver, Colorado, 80236.